The first patrol was actually, it was a convoy. If you're talking about the first possibility in-country engagement, we was in a convoy. We were going to a new location to set up a base camp, and it was a large group. It was a company. We were going by vehicle. And I know that on the way out on the dirt road we were driving out, and it was kind of a main thoroughfare, but it was still a dirt road, I heard machine gun fire. Well, first of all, we had to all get under cover, and take up positions, to secure the area. And then once we were able to get back in and proceed, when we got up there, I noticed that there were some soldiers that were killed, and they had like the ponchos over them, and I grew up in Waterloo, and it was pretty much a traditional childhood growing up. My father served I was a veteran from World War II, and also some of my uncles were as well. And I even believe my grandfather was a veteran. I was drafted. My friends around me were getting drafted, and again, because of the family involvement in previous veteran service, I just assumed that it was part of it, that I was going to be called upon to serve, and I'd do it. I was drafted. I just made the assumption every step was going to be directed towards going to Vietnam. I just felt it was a duty or an obligation, to just kind of go with it. So I just felt that if, I was called upon, it was my duty to do it. I didn't look to any alternatives or even give consideration like deferments, college. It was pretty much our mindset back then that this was the right thing to do. That's kind of the way we were taught, in the military, as my recollection goes, that it was to stop the domino theory is the reason we were going to Vietnam, to stop communism from spreading throughout the countries over there.
Rare film footage recently obtained from behind the Iron Curtain exposes the true significance of the promises and alleged good intentions of the communists.
And then you start hearing, well, maybe it was a geopolitical thing. The United States wanted to have influence because of China, so they wanted to have a dominant country, And then another thing that came up was the oil deposits off the South China Sea. So to be honest with you, today, 50 years later, I'm not really sure what our purpose was there. And I'm not sure that, I think even historians and stuff, I think would have mixed views on that or different opinions of that. So. But I certainly look at it different now. I'm not all just gung-ho saying, yeah, this is to stop the domino theory of the spread of communism. I don't know if this is shared by most, but you really think you're going to get killed over there, And it was just that it was my obligation, my duty and responsibility, to follow kind of in the footsteps of my father, and to serve the country. When we were flying over there, the pilot just announced, this is when we were just about ready to go into Vietnam, said we'll be landing in such and such time. And just shortly after he said that, there was a big black explosion, right? I was sitting on the left side that come across the window, and gel come across the window. So an engine apparently malfunctioned or something. You know how you would be in a plane now that if it goes like that and You hear that, everybody be terrified. Well, I remember that it just didn't really bother me. And I thought, that's crazy, you know. And I think it's because you have the mindset, you're gonna go there and get killed anyway. So, I mean, that might sound crazy to you, but that's kind of, I remember that pretty vividly, you know. That's kind of how I felt at the time, and I thought that was a little strange, but. That heat, I mean, it was like, seriously, it was like stepping right into an oven. It just, I mean, it was like a wall right in front of you. And I don't recall what the temperature was. I'm sure it was 100 plus, you know, but, and it took a period of time to acclimate to that type of temperature and environment over there. It was in Saigon that we landed, and then what they do, and I think probably for most everyone, is you have 1 week of acclimation to the area, and they give you some specialized training there. So you do that training for about a week and get used to the temperature, and then get assigned. I started out in Tay Ninh, and I really worked in numerous provinces throughout the country. Was in Cu Chi, Chu Lai, and when I ended up leaving, it was just south of Da Nang. I was 11 Delta 40, which is a recon scout, was my specialty in the service. We had a multitude of duties, actually. We would sometimes serve as cover for mine sweeping operations, where you'd have people go out and sweep for mines. We would do ambush patrols. They would fly us out in the jungle and drop us off on mountaintops to observe, like at night. If there was like mortar fire coming from the enemy, we could identify the coordinates and call that into base camp. Probably the primary assignment was we would go out to observe and not engage prior to major operations. So they would send us out into an area and then we would observe, you know, if there was enemy movement out there, etc., and then report back so they could better establish the operation that was going to be performed out there. You're apprehensive like anyone would be going on your first assignment until you really learn, you know, how everything works. The first patrol was actually, it was a convoy. If you're talking about the first possibility in-country engagement, we were going by vehicle. And I know that on the way out on the dirt road we were driving out, I heard machine gun fire. To hear the machine gun fire up there in real time, in a real live situation, well, first of all, we had to all get under cover, you know, and take up positions, you know, to secure the area. And then once we were able to get back in and proceed, when we got up there, I noticed that there were some soldiers that were killed, and they had like the ponchos over them. Thinking about the guys that didn't. Sorry, I didn't. This usually doesn't happen to me. Well, it was just part of it, you know. It was the training, and I guess they were covered up. It was their boots that were hanging out, and you just, you know, you didn't have a face to identify because we was all new, mixed into the group. So it was just part of what I expected. And then, of course, with us taking cover and stuff, setting up a perimeter, and then when we advanced forward, and then the ponchos that were covering the guys and just their boots sticking out, it was really, it made, it just made it real, So, I mean, I can't recall exactly for sure how many guys were there, but it definitely had an impact on myself and everybody, So there were a lot of us that were new, that were going on our very first assignment that time. And I mean, as well as what they would do, typically they would kind of half and half. They would put half veterans that had like 6 months experience or whatever in Vietnam, then they'd introduce new people in there so you could kind of share the ins and outs, and stuff. So, but it was a bad deal. Right off the bat, it made it, and this isn't a cakewalk over here, this is real. One of the first contacts, I believe, was they had a road. It was kind of a main thoroughfare, and from historically, the Viet Cong or NVA would blow that place up, the culvert, and it would stop transportation going down the road. And it happened typically once a month. And so they sent a patrol of us out there. I think it was 12 men. And what you do, you're lined up. You have 3 around the perimeter in different locations, and you have a sandbag in front of each of you. And what you do, you just observe in case the enemy's coming in to blow the place up, and to engage if necessary. Well, that deal there, when we first set up out there, it was a little bit light. It wasn't dark yet when we got out there, and I noticed about a half a mile out there were some Vietnamese or Viet Cong. I didn't know for sure, but they were really paying special attention to us. And I had that inner feeling that something wasn't right the way they were watching us. And so then after dark, what you do, the 3 people in each of the various locations, you rotate every 2 hours. Anyway, I'm sleeping, and the guy next to me on the right, he was on duty, and I heard a thump, and I knew exactly what it was, even though I was sleeping. It was a grenade. The first one landed right next to my foot. I mean, seriously, it was like about a foot from my foot, and he jumped on top of me. He yelled grenade. Well, all of us knew what it was by the sound, and jumped on top of me, and then it blew up, and it really injured him severely, his legs. He was evacuated into the center. The guy to the left of me, it knocked him out, and all I did is this is crazy, but I just got like small hand grenade fragments in my hand. My left hand, as a matter of fact, which would have been the furthest point on my body from where the grenade went off. So I don't know how to figure that one out, but anyway, they evacuated both of them into the center. And then I called in illumination, and I had an M60 machine gun in front of me, but one thing you're taught is you don't use that, because that absolutely identifies your exact location because of the continuous flash. But I mean, they knew where it was at anyways, but I didn't use that. I used an M79 grenade launcher. And when they called in illumination, you could still see some enemy activity out there, trying to tint the glare of the illumination like everybody would be doing. So we engaged them for a while, and then the next morning we left. I know we got into a situation over there where there were these red ants, the army ants. I think that was what they were called, and I mean, they were terrible. I mean, they would bite you, and so I know we went through one place, and they're by the millions. When you see them on vines, it's like a wave going up. And they dropped on us, and we had to disrobe in order to get them all off from us. I never was even drunk before I went to Vietnam, but I did get drunk over there. I was on vodka, and it took me, and I went and took a shower and everything. I thought, this is not good. It's got control of me, so that didn't work getting me sober. But as far as marijuana use goes, yeah, everybody did it. Of course, you didn't do it at the times of when you were going to be involved or engaged. I certainly didn't do it then, but when you'd come back in from a duty assignment, you might have a day or two back at the place. everybody did it. You'd go out and sit out, I mean, the sergeants and the whole 9 yards, you know, you'd sit out there and you would you'd smoke some pot. You know, it was just kind of you listen to some music and just kick back and relax. And at least in my unit, I'm sure there were people that were totally opposed to it, but I can't think of anybody that wasn't involved in it. I mean, it was high-grade stuff, too. A lot of it was cured with opium. It made you mellow and made you forget. I mean, you just enjoyed the sounds and stuff back at that time. But it was pretty common knowledge, and I think probably throughout Vietnam, is that the Viet Cong actually blended in, and they were villagers. I mean, they were regular Vietnamese people in the daytime, and at night they became a Viet Cong. It wasn't at all unusual for one of the Vietnamese to cut your hair during the day and then to be killed in an ambush patrol or captured as a Viet Cong in an ambush patrol at night. I did lose a number of friends over there, you know. I know, for example, I would rotate with this one guy on a Jeep, a machine gun Jeep, and it just happened, it was his day. Mine was the day before, and mine had been the day after, and he went out and he went over a mine and killed him. And that was really a bad deal there, obviously, on that. And his story was, he was initially a Cuban refugee, and he had just received a letter that his wife had a baby, and he hadn't seen the baby or anything, you know. So, of course, that made it even more tragic, you know. But those happen quite often, actually. But then again, another time was when we were ambushed out on a road. We were going down, and we were just surprisingly ambushed, and we were pinned down, and we had to call in air support. We was actually guarding a minesweeping team that was several hundred yards out in front of us when they didn't have weapons with them. And I know there was an enemy squad that was moving down towards them. We were really in a terrible situation at the time. And so I took about 200-300 rounds of ammunition, and I ran up to where they were. I wasn't given an order to go up there. It just seemed the natural thing to do. You know, I was in a position up there. I'm very familiar with it. I used an M60 machine gun, so I grabbed, you know, like I said, 200-300 rounds, threw them over my shoulder, and ran up there to where the guys were pinned down. You know, and I was able to put out enough fire, you know, suppressive fire at the time, that permitted them as well as myself to get back to the primary location of our group. And I was awarded the Bronze Star with V device for that act. And like I said, not setting me aside from anybody else, because I think all soldiers in one way or another are doing comparable things over there, you know, that could be viewed as heroic acts. So I feel, man, I was really lucky. I mean, seriously. I don't know if every soldier feels that way, but there are so many times I was so lucky I should not have made it, you know, and I did, and so I guess in that regard, you know, I feel that I was really lucky over there, and my training certainly did take over, but beyond the training, it was just a matter of the draw, you know. I mean, for example, like a mine that had minesweepers out in front of us in vehicles, and you could see the line right where they'd buried the cable right across the road, and yet the minesweepers, for some unknown reason, actually missed it that time. And we just lucked out and spotted it and stopped. And it ended up was a 250-pound bomb, you know, that was, you know, located and removed, you know, from the area. But that could have been just totally tragic. I mean, it would have been tragic, no doubt. I remember driving over one place. I was a machine gunner on a Jeep, and we drove over this one mine, and behind us was a 3/4 ton. And I remember they set the mine off on them. I think it was Command Det. They set it off, and I remember swinging around, and you could see a big black cloud of smoke, and the guys flying right up through it, you know. I just think the training was important, very important, and I would encourage anybody that goes in the military to pay attention to all the classes and listen. And then the luck, you know, you're either lucky or you're not.
Thousands of demonstrators opposed to the Vietnam War assembled in the nation's capital for a mass protest. Military police contain the crowd, but clashes soon break out. Federal marshals arrest several who attempt to break through the...
When you go in, you really kind of get brainwashed, so to speak, you know, that you're doing the absolute right thing based on your thoughts at that time. And I recall my mother sent me the newspaper that she would send over there, and one of the newspaper articles I had seen where there was like 500,000 protesters out in New York. And I wrote a letter back to my mother. I said, seriously, how can this be? I mean, I can't imagine that many crazy people being in the whole country, let alone one city. But see, I had a complete different perspective of the war compared to people that had put more rational thought into it back here in the country. You know, I mean, protesting is good. Demonstrations are good if they're done the right way. And so you have to respect that. But it was an article that I wrote that I would since probably write a lot different.
Official U.S. Navy films show our jet fighter bombers plastering North Vietnam communication and boat repair facilities.
My experiences reading different stories and seeing what we did see, a lot of it was propagandized. I mean, seriously, I mean, even the after-action reports that were written, they were very, very inaccurate, but it always made the Americans, you know, sound super. It didn't always tell a real story. Now, that probably changed, you know, with the national media, you know, over there, over time, where they were, instead of just taking this information from the government, they were actually, you know, doing some exploring on their own. It's like that time they said no troops are in Cambodia, and I mean, I was like 15 miles on a mission in Cambodia, you know, and there was no questions about that. As far as actually reporting on the way things actually happened there, I think a lot of that was distorted, in my opinion. As far as what we were accomplishing, you know, I'm not sure about that. My best day, I think probably I don't know if it'd be the normal answer, is getting ready to come home. You know, as soon as you get there, you start a clock, a countdown, you know, 365 days to go, because the normal tour is 1 year. And then it doesn't really take meaning until you get into that short, you know, I'm short, you know, I'm going to be coming back soon. And you really put a lot of emphasis on the X's on the days. And then the last week before you actually are going to leave country, generally, at least in our unit, they pull you out of the field. You don't go on any more missions out there. You know, you do different things around there and get stuff in order, etc. So I think just getting ready to come home was probably that for me. My mind was starting to change a little bit when I got back. It's like I had mentioned earlier, you know, was we there for this domino theory to stop communism spreading, or the geopolitical aspect, or the oil deposits? And these guys do have a right. You have to respect. That's what it's all about. I mean, when you go into war even, is to provide rights for people in this country, you know, to protest and to demonstrate and stuff like that. Again, I wished they would have directed it more towards the government instead of the soldiers, who were simply just doing a job, fulfilling a responsibility. Today, that's different, in my opinion. I mean, everywhere you go, they honor and respect, you know, the soldiers, and rightfully so, they should, you know. But back then, it was totally different. You know, when I saw the demonstrations, you know, and stuff, a lot of it was directed towards, you know, the actual veterans. people over there who you have to sympathize with what they went through. I mean, the kids and stuff, and I mean, even the parents. I mean, I recall I had my ankle busted over there, and after I was back from the hospital, I still had a cast on, and I was in charge of having these Vietnamese fill sandbags and do miscellaneous work around there. And I remember vividly thinking, this could be my father. And here's a guy in a war-torn country that's out here working for like 100 piastres or something a day, $1 a day or something, you know. And I mean, you know, I mean, their health is terrible, you know, and it really made you think about the people over there. So if you look at it as a whole, you have to have sympathy to all the people that are affected. I mean, look at all the people that have lost, 58,000, you know, plus guys were killed over there, you know, men, women, you know, and that's tragic. That affects a lot of families, but think of how many thousands of Vietnamese were killed over there, you know, but, and so that's had a heck of an effect on a lot of people. War.